Welcome everyone. Back to another yapping video. I'm gonna make another presentation just like I have done in high school because you guys really seem to enjoy these types of video. These are gonna be my top 5 tips on how to climb in solo queue, and unlike other videos on YouTube, they're actually going to be concrete things that you can take into your solo queue games and see instant improvement. And here you have a picture of me climbing because I figured it was fitting. If you do enjoy the content, by the way, please do subscribe, leave a comment what you think about this format, what you want me to see do next, and leave a like. Helps me out a bunch. And if you do want to get coaching, message me on Discord. Check out the Patreon if you want to see weekly commentaries. So, the first thing that I hear people struggling a lot with is they're playing laning phase and they just get ganked, right? They have a lot of deaths to ganks. They're not dying in the isolated 1v1. They're actually winning their lane quite a lot, but they're just dying at unfortunate timers because the jungler is coming mid lane. So, let's talk about how you avoid this. So, the general rule that I have for people is whenever you're walking across the middle of the lane, so imagine the lane in the middle, if you ever walk across that point, you need to have a ward out or you need to push as quickly as possible, right? Because otherwise you're vulnerable to a gank. So, whenever you're pushing during the first couple of waves, a ward that I really like to do is this one that I'm showing on screen here, the level 2 ward. I go for this ward basically every single game that I'm pushing. And the next thing that is important is when you have warded a side of the lane, remember to hover that side. As you can see here, I go for the classic level 2 ward again because I have a matchup where I'm pushing. And then you can see the side of the lane, I have it marked down where you need to play towards. The reason you need to play towards this side is because you have vision on this side, so you know you're safe here, right? That means if the jungler shows up on the ward, one, you're going to see him and you can run away, and if the jungler doesn't show up on the ward, that means he's on the opposite side of the lane, which now means you're hovering away from where he's playing, which makes the gank a lot harder to work, right? So now let's take a look at a couple of examples from a couple of games that I have and a coaching session that I had with a student. So the first example I want to show is one of my Twisted Fate games from around Diamond Elo. That is a commentary from my Patreon over at patreon.com/shori, where I upload commentaries weekly, and you can make commentary requests if you want to see me play any specific champions. We're just going to have a look at this clip, and you're going to tell me what you think is wrong or what you think is done well by me this game, right? So I get ganked at level 3. Why is that? Well, what is the problem? I have my ward available, I walked across the middle of the lane, and I didn't put my ward out, which meant I had no side to hover, right? Next, let's get into a clip from one of my students. If you want to get coaching from me, just like this student, and you want to go climb to the moon, you can just add me on Discord and message me. But look at the student here. We go for a trade, we walk across the lane, and we go for a ward now. Very, very good. I'm smiling about this in the session. And now Trundle comes mid lane, but because my Lux is hovering the top side where she has a ward, she ends up escaping without having to blow her flash. That is why it is so important to go for this ward. So the next issue I see a lot during coaching sessions is people are not sure how to navigate the laning phase. So, let me tell you. Playing mid lane, the way you navigate laning phase is you try to impact the map. People have this misunderstanding that they need to generate like small CS advantages and try to look for solo kills mid lane. Absolutely an outdated idea. Ever since Doinby won Worlds in Season 9, we have understood that the way you play mid lane now is you just try to explode out onto the map, even if it means you're not giving yourself as many individual resources. Unless you're playing hypercarry champions, that changes it a little bit. So, the rule that I'm going to give you is you're always going to push your lane. I don't care. It's just the easiest way to impact the game. Of course, some players will tell you, nah, you should actually freeze in this specific instance. The problem is, if you're not very, very comfortable and aware of what you're doing, freezing has a pretty high likelihood of just being bad. But pushing can never be bad. Pushing can be suboptimal in instances, but it is never bad. Freezing can just straight up ruin your game if you don't know when to freeze, right? The intention behind pushing is not to kill the enemy lane or anything like that. The intention behind pushing is freeing yourself up so you can get out onto the map. So, your intention? Push and try to roam. Now, if the enemy laner walks up and tries to fight you, obviously you can fight back. But that just means that you have to now fight him for priority. He understands that he also wants to push to try to impact the game, right? Because that is how we impact the game as mid laners. We push and then we roam. So if he walks up, you fight him. If he doesn't walk up, you push him under tower, and then you make the enemy bot laner go 0-20. If the enemy mid laner does not want to fight you and you're stronger than him, roam. Leave the lane. Don't try to fight him. You can see this example I have right here. The enemy Akali, she's 2-1, but her bot laner is getting blasted. That is a good example of a game of playing mid lane. I don't have to kill the Akali. I will push you under tower, then roam bot lane and kill them on repeat. And that is a good game when you play mid lane. You want to get your teammates ahead. You don't need to get yourself that far ahead. Another thing that I see people be confused about is after they've pushed, what do they have to do? And I have a little, like, just some couple of points that you can take. So when you push, there are a few questions I want you to ask yourself every single time you push out the wave, by the way. The first thing is, do I have to recall? And the things to consider here are your mana bar, your HP bar, and your amount of gold. If you have low HP, low mana, or a lot of gold, you should probably just take your recall, right? The next one is, can I roam anywhere? So what you want to do here is you want to look at your minimap and you want to be like, okay, does anywhere look really obvious to roam to? Maybe bot lane is overextended, maybe top lane is overextended, and then you can try to roam there, right? Don't be afraid to cut off the roam. So it might look good when you're sitting mid lane and looking for this roam, but when you get halfway down the river, the roam all of a sudden looks really bad. Don't be afraid to just say, okay, I'm not going to commit to this roam. I'm just going to run back to mid lane and push out another wave and then see if I can roam now. Don't be afraid to cut off roams. Next one is, can I get a ward anywhere? That's the last question you ask yourself. If you can't recall or you can't roam, you don't have to recall, or you can't roam, then ask yourself, can I get a ward? How much time do I have to get this ward? Maybe you can only get a quick little ward out because the waves are very close to meeting already. Maybe you have a lot of time and then you can go for a deep ward and get a lot of deep vision and get your teammates a lot of vision in that way, which makes it easier for you to play the game. So we're going to do a little pub quiz on what to do after you push out the wave. So, this game, playing Way, I'm about to push out the wave. What do you think I should do after I've pushed out this wave? I would argue that because I'm low on mana, low on health, and have a decent amount of gold, I should just take my base and recall and then come back into the lane. And that is exactly what I do. I cannot roam when my mana pool is this low. There's no reason to go for a ward if I want to base anyway. That is why basing takes priority over everything else. Next, let's talk about this echo game right here. I push out the wave, what should I do? I push out the wave, do I need to base? No. Okay, let's look at the minimap then. Is there anywhere that I can roam? Bot lane, looks like the enemy bot lane is under tower. So we look down at the bot lane, and then we ask ourselves if we can dive this. And I think the answer to that question is yes. So I end up going bot lane, I go for a dive, we kill the Kai'Sa, I misplay horribly, but doesn't matter, we kill the Kai'Sa, and that's what matters, right? I got my roam off. Now, the next point I'm actually going to make an entire video on in the future, but I figured I'd put it in here because I see a lot of people mess it up, especially at lower MMRs whenever I record Smurf commentaries for skill capped, and it is how to play side lane. So your objective is collecting resources, right? Like, that is what you are trying to do in the side lane. So you want to go to a lane where no one else is so you can get solo gold and solo XP. And the rule I'm going to give you is every time you leave base, you look down at your minimap and you ask yourself, where can I go without taking resources from anyone else? So here, let's look at these two examples, right? So, the first example, I'm playing Echo, right? Let's have a look at the map. Yone is on the bot side, Brand is mid lane, 3 players on mid lane. I don't really know what champions they are. But what does that mean? Well, it means if I go mid lane, I'm gonna steal resources from someone. If I go bot lane, I'm gonna steal resources from Yone. What lane does that leave me with? Top lane. Perfect, I'll run top lane then. The other example, I'm playing Orianna. And this one is a little bit more in depth. But Seth is playing top lane, no one is mid lane, and no one is bot lane. Where should I run? I think I should run bot lane here because I know that my bot lane wants to go mid lane because we have broken the tower. And you can reason this while you are in base, and then make the decision while you're running out of base, and it's very important you do this. The next thing you want to do is while you're in the side lane, you want to try to track where the enemy team members are on the map, and we're going to get into a little video clip after this so I can give you an example of how to track enemies on the map. But what essentially you're trying to do is rule out where enemy champions can be, because that allows you to deduce how far up you can walk in the lane. If you don't see anyone on the map, obviously you cannot walk very far up in the side lane because you have a very high likelihood of getting caught. But if you see everyone on the map, or you know approximately where everyone is on the map, you can pressure very aggressively in the side lane and force people to come to you. And the last thing you need to do is you need to look for plays. Just like when you push out mid lane, every time you push out your side lane, you try to look for a play. What I really like doing is I like pushing out the side lane and then walking into the jungle, sweeping the entire area, taking full vision control, and then either trapping to try to kill someone, or I try to group up with my team's mid lane and look for a flank while someone is catching that bot wave that I've just pushed out, for example, right? Now the last one is, which side should you play on? So here, I have a couple of instances as well. Ideally, if you have teleport, you want to play on the opposite side of the next big neutral objective, because that means you can apply a ton of pressure, have someone catch the wave, and then teleport over to join the big neutral objective fight, or try to start the neutral objective while someone is catching that wave. So, if you have teleport and Baron is up and your teammates are trying to play for Baron, run bot lane and pressure the bot side, right? If you have teleport. Now you might be playing a champion that is closer to an assassin. I like playing Ahri a lot. Ari and other assassins should play on the side of the big neutral objective. Why is that? Well, it's because you actually want to push out the lane, right? So, say Baron is up, you want to push out top lane, then you want to walk into the jungle like I talked about earlier, sweep the entire area, and now you're controlling the entire enemy jungle around the next big neutral objective, which means the enemy has to face check into you to make sure that you're not doing the Baron, and you can usually find kills that way. So let's get into a couple of examples. Let's look at the screen here. Let's look at the screenshot. The one on the left, right? So Baron is the next big neutral objective. I'm playing Orianna. My Xerath, my bot lane is mid lane. My Zed is top lane. And I have teleport available. Where should I try to play towards? Well, bot lane looks like a very good spot right now. You might say Zed should be playing bot lane, but Zed actually doesn't run teleport this game. So it is now my job to play on the opposite side of the next big neutral objective, which is bot lane. The other example here, I'm playing Talon. I'm not running teleport on Talon, I'm playing an assassin. The next big neutral objective coming up is the dragon. That's what we're trying to play towards. Which side of the lane or which side of the map should I play towards? Well, I should now play towards the dragon because now I can push out that bot lane and then I can sweep the enemy bot side jungle and make it very hard for them to walk in and contest us, right? You see how easy this actually is to reason through? You just have to remember to do it in the game. Every single time you leave base, I want you to think about this. Every time. Next, we have an example from the same Echo game that I showed you guys earlier about how to play side lane. So, we're in the side lane, we're on the top side of the map. Why are we on the top side of the map? That's right, because Baron is up and we're trying to play around Baron. So, we want to control the enemy jungle, right? So, we push out this wave, and then what should we do? I would argue that I should run down into the enemy jungle, sweep the area, and then look for a trap. And that is exactly what I do, because I want to control the enemy bot side jungle. And eventually, lo and behold, the enemy Kai'Sa overextends, I manage to find her, and we get a free kill. And now we get to control that entire area of the map. Next, this Talon game. I've just pushed out top lane. Take a moment to look at the minimap. What is going on mid lane? Looks like there's a fight. I have pushed out my lane. Now I can look to group up and try to force a fight or make something happen. So I think I should run mid lane here because there's a fight happening and I can make an impact. And lo and behold, I find the Seraphine. Last example is going to be how do you track the enemies during the mid game while you're in the side lane. So pay extra attention to the minimap here, right? We're going to try to use deductive reasoning to figure out where the enemy can be on the map. So I'm going to play this clip and you tell me where the enemy champions are and where they can be on the map. So look at the minimap. Jhin just died bot lane. Irelia is mid lane. Who's unaccounted for? Okay? Now we know that the Seraphine and Yi are topside. What does that mean? Well, that means they can easily run up and kill me, so what should I do? Well, now I can't take the tower, right? So I should just base, which is exactly what I do. The next point is how do we navigate fights, right? A lot of people struggle with navigating fights, especially at the lower end of the ladder where I see the most delusional take of all time. Whenever you play fights in lower MMRs and you don't kill the enemy carry, everyone just types, "Focus the enemy carry, man!" Type racer gamers. Now, it's not that easy to just focus the enemy carry, right? Unless you want to familiarize yourself with the experience of walking between two big burly men, aka the enemy frontline. I don't recommend just focusing the enemy carry. You have to be able to navigate fights properly. Sometimes that means you can look for flanks, sometimes that means you kill the enemy frontline and play front to back. But think about this before you actually start playing fights. The next thing is, you need to recognize who the biggest threats are on the enemy team. No matter what role you're playing, this is what you need to do, because this will influence how you are going to play fights, right? So, the way that I usually do this is every single time I leave base, as you can tell, there's a lot of stuff you need to do while you're leaving base, which is why it's very important you get into the habit of doing this. You recognize who the biggest threats are on the enemy team. Usually this will come in the form of CC or burst damage. So CC, these are champions like the Malphite there, right? You need to think about this because otherwise it's very easy to get, oh, jump scare. It's a Malphite. He's just in my face all of a sudden. Yeah. Otherwise it's very, very easy to just rock up to a fight, not be aware of who you need to be paying attention to, and then all of a sudden you have a Malphite on top of you and you're dead, right? But if you're actually paying attention and specifically looking for that Malphite when you're going into these fights, you will have a much easier time reacting when the Malphite flash ults towards you, right? And the biggest threats are usually CC and damage, like I said earlier, right? So biggest thing to pay attention to is champions that can CC you very easily. The enemy frontline, usually. And then pay extra attention to them in fights. Assassins are also one, because they have a lot of burst damage. You also need to pay attention to those in fights. But then you don't really need to look at anything else. So I have an example here for you. Who are the biggest threats on the enemy team? I'll give you a minute. So they have Trundle, Zac, Sylas, Misfortune, and Lux. Who are the biggest threats? I would argue the biggest threat on the enemy team here, despite the fact that they have a 9-3 trundle, I would say the biggest threat is Zac. Why is Zac the biggest threat? He's the easiest champion on the enemy team that can CC me. Who is the second biggest threat on the enemy team? Well, I would actually argue that's Silas, because he is the second easiest champion that can CC me, or like has the easiest time of CCing me. So who do I need to track in these fights? I need to track Zac, and I need to track Silas. If neither of them are on my screen, my priority now changes. Now I'm tracking the Trundle because he also has CC, and I'm tracking the Lux because she also has CC. But the way it works is you have priority targets you track, and then you have lower priority targets you track afterwards if those champions are not in the fight or not on your screen, right? That is how this works. But I would track Zac, Silas, Trundle, Lux in that order, and MF last, which might be surprising to some of you, but my job is not to kill the enemy MF. The next thing I'm going to talk about is a little bit of a mental thing. It's a sprint, not a marathon. Improving in League of Legends takes time. It takes a bunch of games of conscious effort, of you going into games, having one specific thing you're trying to focus on or trying to remember, constantly reminding yourself of that during the game. So for example, what you could do is you could say, I'm going to try to remind myself to look for a roam whenever I push out the wave. And then you strictly focus on that during the game. And I don't care if you don't do anything else well in the game. As long as you focus on that specific thing for, let's say, 10 to 20 games straight, all of a sudden it will be a habit, which now means you don't have to focus on that, and now you can focus on a new thing, and all of a sudden you have improved. Remember, what you want to do is you want to have a constant upwards trend, right? You will play worse in some games. You will play bad in some games. What matters is your overall average is increasing because you're improving, right? That is what matters. Just like this Tesla stock right here, which is definitely constantly climbing. Please, Elon, fix it. Yeah, you will lose games even if you play well. That's the second thing to understand, right? Some games you will just lose, but as long as you have a positive impact on every single game, that is what matters. You need to look for positive EV plays. Plays that over the span of a lot of games will end up netting you a positive result. Which leads me into my last point. Stop typing. There's no reason. Do you know what this game is right here? It's Type Racer. If you want to go type a lot and type very fast, go play Type Racer. Typing is a negative EV play. Typing will never be a positive play over the span of a lot of games. You are actively harming your potential of climbing by typing because you are making your teammates play worse. You are making yourself play worse because you know what happens? All of a sudden, your bot lane is losing, right? The support types the AD carry. What the fuck are you doing, man? And then all of a sudden they're arguing. And now you join in as the mid laner and you're like, guys, shut the fuck up, I'm trying to focus. And now your top laner joins in and he's like, shut the fuck up, where's my jungler? And now all of a sudden everyone is typing to each other and no one's actually focusing on the game, which means that you're way more likely to lose. So just stop typing. You are making your teammates not focus on the game, and you are making yourself not focus on the game by typing. I know that it takes emotional control to just be willing to mute everyone and not talk to anyone, but unless you're trying to play Club Penguin, which is a social game, then don't type in League of Legends if you actually want to win. It is actively worsening your chance of winning the game and actively lowering your win rate. Just don't type and you will have way better results. People need to understand this. That is all I have for you guys today, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below, and have a good one. See ya.